All right, welcome. This is the Getting Started in Fantasy Football panel. I'm Joe Bryant. We run a site called Football Guys, and this is going to be good. I'm glad it's a smaller crowd. Do we even need the microphone? We have to have the mic better? Okay. I'm biased, but I think this is the best bunch of people that you come up with to talk about how to get started in the fantasy industry. And then half of the faces I see out here could be up here as well. So I've got a few questions for these guys, but then let's make this a Q&A. I think the best thing for this group, y'all agree with that, can be Q&A. Let me just do a super quick poll here. Who right now is already creating content in fantasy space? Okay. Derek, really? Yeah. All right. Who's doing written content? Who's doing only written content? Or let's say just part of what you're doing is written content. Is almost everybody doing written? All right. Who's doing audio content? Podcast stuff? Who's doing video stuff? YouTube. Okay. So who's not? Anybody not yet doing content that wants to? All right. These three, keep them up there. All right. You three get to be friends with the rest of these folks, okay? Because the most important thing I'll say on this, my number one biggest point on this, is this industry. I personally don't think, and I think these guys would all agree with me, I don't think there's a more fun, cooperative, collaborative industry that I know of than the fantasy industry. We all technically compete. I mean, Derek and I work for two direct competitors, but the spirit of that just is not that really that we don't. Yes, we do compete, but the audience of people out there is enormous. There is way more customers out there than Football Guys can serve or Derek can ever serve. So don't think of this as a zero-sum game, all right? And the easiest way I always say that is for you to win does not mean for the other guy has to lose, all right? And there used to be, I really think our industry is in a better place. Maybe JJ and Andy, you might have a thought on this, but I think we're better at this than we used to be. In the old days, it was a little bit more turf war-y and kind of weird this way. And I don't know if it's like the beer industry that's done this or some of these other, you just see more collaboration among companies. It's like we're all trying to do kind of the same thing, and the number of people we're trying to serve out there is gigantic. So that's my number one point. We're all in this together, and it's not a zero-sum game. My second biggest point is it's not about you. The way you're going to win at this game is if the customer wins. I always was having a conversation with Steven walking over here. If you think of yourself as you're Yoda and the customer is Luke, right? You're the guide, they're the hero. If you can frame almost everything you do in that dynamic of Yoda and Luke or Mick and Rocky or Hamish and Katniss, whatever works for you, but think of yourself as the guide and that customer as the hero, and that should drive almost all the way you do your content. Okay, that's enough from me. We got a great group up here. Starting on the end, let me start in the middle here. Andy Behrens, because I picked Andy first because he's been doing this about as long as me, right? So there's two old. Andy and I joke about the way to succeed in fantasy football is easy. Invent a time machine and go back to 1998, and you're the only one doing it. So that doesn't work. But Andy's super wise and has a lot of great perspective. We tried to get JJ Zachariason here, and instead got JJ Zachariason. But we're here. You know about JJ. JJ brings a lot to this because he's seen it from multiple sides. He was in the bigger stuff with doing obviously Number Fire and then FanDuel, and then several years now doing his own thing on a less big company, although the content's better than ever. So we're glad to have him here. And then these two guys on the end, I've had an up-close front row seat seeing them do this with Football Guys. We've got Jeff Bill here and then Alfedo Brown on the end. So I think it's a good, diverse enough group to get different perspectives on it. The first thing, and I just got like 3 questions for y'all. We'll do that quick, and then we'll jump into some Q&A if that's good. But the first one is kind of a broad question, is if one of your close friends were to ask you what they should focus on if they want to get started in the fantasy industry, what would you tell them?
Awesome. That's fine. First, don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think that if you look at the fantasy space, I started doing this in about 2012, and every single year, the space gets more and more saturated with just more and more people wanting to do this. And I'm sure that it's really, really overwhelming if you're someone on the outside trying to step in and say, I'm going to create content. How am I possibly going to stand out? And I think that question, though, is sort of the answer here of find something. First off, understand who you are as, as an analyst, as a creator. But you really do need to find, I think especially these days more so, you can't necessarily just attach yourself to a bigger brand and just build through the brand and go that route. I really think it's about finding something that differentiates you. And it, whenever I say that to people, I think a lot of people think that, it means that, you have to figure out how to do a piece of content differently in terms of like the topic that you're researching. Like a good example of that is like Matt Harmon, who I don't know if he's here today, I haven't seen him today, but Matt Harmon with reception perception, right? It was a brand new way of sort of looking at the wide receiver position that no one had really done before. And we see examples of that all the time, and that really allowed him to stand out and sort of start to move his career forward. But I also think that I have the Late Round podcast, and hopefully my analysis is good, but I think that what really resonated with people was that it's, I looked around the space and there's a bunch of hour-long shows, and I'm like, well, there's no 15, 20-minute shows, so I'm going to start to do episodes that are 15 to 20 minutes long to stand out a little bit, because that alone, that piece, has nothing to do with the actual type of content that you're doing, but sort of thinking outside the box of how can I deliver this content in a different way. And so I think, differentiation, it's a really simple answer, but and it's an answer that's unique to every individual. Whenever I say it to people, they'll say, oh, what is missing in the fantasy space? I'm like, well, if I had that answer, I'd probably try to do it myself, right? But it is really, really important to find, who you are as an analyst and see what's not being done out there, and really, really hone in and focus on that thing. And again, it doesn't have to be like, oh, no one's talking about this strategy or something like that. It can be as simple as like, no one's delivering this message in this way.
The first thing I'll say about this is that you've all kind of cleared the first hurdle, because the first thing I tell people when they talk to me about getting into the industry is you should come to the Expo, and you should just meet everybody, because as Joe said, it's a super friendly industry, right? There's a lot of camaraderie here. It's not deeply competitive. It's a lot of people supporting one another. So like getting here is the first big step to take. To sort of pick up from JJ, I will also say that like I cover baseball as well, and baseball increasingly feels like it's just a solved problem, right? There's a lot of undiscovered country in football still, right? Like we haven't figured everything out just yet. There's a lot being done in analytics that feels new every year, right? So there are still places where you can fill gaps that are not currently filled. There's a lot of niches that are available to people that are really passionate about it. The other thing I would just say is it's really, and this, I love the way that Joe started this presentation by asking how many people are writing, how many people are podcasting, how many people are audio, video, all that. Like, if you do want to, if you do have ambitions beyond, hey, I want to start a podcast, like if you want to work for Football Guys, you want to come to Yahoo, wherever, everything that you decide you're not going to do, like I don't want to write. I don't want to do video. Everything you decide you don't want to do is a door you're closing, right? And so when Yahoo's hiring, I'm sure when Fantasy Pros is hiring, when Football Guys is hiring, like they're going to think about what you've chosen not to do. Like if you only have one lane, if you only want a podcast, you better be the best in the game at that. Otherwise, we're hiring people who are doing a little bit of everything and have pretty much everything in the toolbox.
Really important. So just something to add, because that's a really, really good point. And I think it goes beyond what you think of, okay, I'm a triple threat in terms of being in front of a camera, doing audio, and being able to write and stuff. If you have a skill set that's beyond that, if it's graphic design, if it's business related or something like that, you can leverage that as well while talking to those companies, and that's an in for you that other people wouldn't have. So I just wanted to add that too.
So I think a lot of this goes back to some of the stuff that JJ was saying about differentiation. Before that, though, the just very first step, and what some of you guys still haven't done yet, is just actually make the content. Do it. Like, that's the hardest thing, is to put yourself out there for people to then judge. Because I know that's probably the scariest thing at first, is what if they don't like what I'm doing? So first do that. The other thing is take a moment to evaluate yourself. What are your strengths? I knew that I came from a background where I had done film study because I got to work with a college football team. I said, okay, that's my strength. I can start off with that. And then I had to figure out, how am I bringing value to a customer? That's something that Joe preaches all the time, is how am I bringing value to this customer? Because that's how you kind of close that, call it the knowledge gap or whatever you want to say. Like, what makes your content stand out? So because there's a million people here, so many people. I've been playing for 20 years. I've been doing this and that. Cool. Why should I be listening to you? Why should I be watching your stuff? Why should I be reading your articles? So find your way that you're going to connect with your audience. And once you do those first two things, put yourself out there and grow that relationship with the audience by finding how you're going to connect to them. From there, it's all just continuing to build on those skills.
I think self-awareness is a big key in knowing where you are in your point of your journey. Recognizing, building that toolbox. Andy made a great point on your toolbox and really narrowing down on that. And it's not only starting to make the content, but making the best that you possibly can. And one of the things I think JJ does fantastic on his 15-minute podcast is that's clean. And it's very accessible, it's very clean. You're not running into any technical errors or anything on that. And so to build that toolbox first, and then that way you're building, if writing's your avenue, all three, I think we've talked about that, going all three paths is the best for everybody, but to build a wide breadth of content and make sure that it's technically clean, that you're ready to present that when your time comes. And then to make it to be your time is to make those connections are huge. And I think that all of you that rose your hand about wanting to make content, get to know each other. And leave this room knowing each other and start to build that support system. I think that everybody up here, we've had that support system at different levels, and be able to have somebody that can make those connections for you, those introductions for you, and then also having that group behind you. And I think all of us sitting up here have a group behind us that helps push and propel to continue to get that out there, that you've got support, but it's realistic support. They're going to tell you what you need to hear at the times you need to hear it. But put those pieces together and make sure to recognize where you are in your journey, and are you ready to make that next step, and what is the questions, what do I need to do to make that next step?
Good stuff, guys. The one thing I would add to that is, as you think about how you're bringing value, think about what success looks like for you and your current thing. Now being in the fantasy industry can mean a ton of different things. It might be like Dr. Vig here, who's a full-time MD. He doesn't have time to spend 40 hours a week on fantasy football. It could be different for what it is for me or for JJ. So I would kind of get real about what you think you want to do, what success looks like for you, and then move towards that. If you don't have that picture, it's really kind of hard to know what you're going for, right? And the other thing I would say on that part-time, full-time thing, we talk about this a lot. The vast majority of our work at Football Guys is done by people that isn't their primary job they do. And so you find a company that allows that to happen. Now, you may work at ESPN, and I don't think they have many part-time people. I mean, they want everybody all in. It's a wide range of availability out there. So just find what you want it to be and go for it from there. And then the last thing is basically what Andy said, make yourself a multi-talented player. You're a baseball, 5-tool player. Because especially in a small company, maybe at ESPN, you've got one specific little thing. At a company like Football Guys, I need people that can do a lot of things. It might be they're doing this one day, they're setting up a poll over here, then they're uploading the video or editing a video or whatever. Almost everybody at Football Guys has worked their way in to something else different than what they started. So that's a big deal. All right, number 2. I say this a lot, and if you know me, you've heard me say it. Social media in 2023 is your resume. And you think about it, and it makes total sense, but I see so many people that don't realize it's a truth. But if you want to date someone, or you want to go to work somewhere, or you want to get to know something more about a person, what does everyone do? They look them up on Twitter, right? Or look them up on whatever social media they're on, and just kind of scroll through. And you can tell a lot about what kind of person somebody is by how they operate. So I would say most people don't, and it kills me with NFL players that get drafted and forget this. They forget about the thing they did. Now, maybe it was 10 years ago, but still, it's there, and you've got to be careful about that as you go about it. So I would say with social media as your resume, what do you guys see as any tips on that, on how to get the most out of using social media?
Sure. My joke on that is don't do what I do, because if anybody knows me, I'm a little bit of a lightning rod on Twitter at times. But one, I try to make sure I'm saying something when I'm saying something on Twitter. And so try to, and by the way you're framing that, you're going to get different types of attention on how you're going to frame it that way. But when I say don't do what I do, I mean be yourself. Do what is going to be good for you. Figure out what's your niche, what do you feel comfortable with, what kind of attention do you want to bring on. But one of the biggest things is something that's always stuck with me, and Matt Harmon mentioned that when you log off Twitter, when you log off social media, that all goes away, and you need to develop that boundary and know when is that time that I need to walk away from this situation, because we see so many times where people, the back and forth can spiral and escalate, and I think we're all have had social media enough in our lives, especially to get to this level, that you're probably not going to change opinions too often. So it's okay to exchange information, but you got to know when that point to walk away is a big key on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's super important to just be authentic, number one. You will get outed eventually if you're not authentic. I mean, it might take time. You might, have some success being fake and not being you, but eventually people start to catch on and realize that you're actually not that person.
It's coming for you.
It's coming for me, yeah, 100%. Yeah, all those dad jokes, and I'm tweeting. So the fantasy football space is interesting to me because sports media is sort of like this in general, where it's very, very, like, if you're a personality, it's very driven on Twitter. Are we calling it X? We're not calling it X. Yeah. Screw you, Elon. No. So it's a very, very Twitter-centric industry, whether we're talking fantasy or just general sports media. And so understand that obviously Twitter is a place for you to be that authentic you and show yourself. But I'll tell you a little story. Like when I was at Numberfire and I was managing and as the editor-in-chief there and managing this writing team, one of the ways that we paid our writers was sort of this like base pay plus page view type model that I had built, where X number of page views, you get some money, and so on and so forth. And it got to a point where if I didn't tweet out their article, they would get upset because it meant that like they weren't getting views or what have you. But I think a lot of people sort of misunderstand what a platform like Twitter is for conversion or for money making ability and such. It's really a branding machine. That's all Twitter is. A place like Twitter is that you're allowing people to see who you are, the kind of life you live, what you stand for, your morals. Like, sure, I share stuff about my family every now and again, or I'll talk about what I'm doing that weekend or what have you, because you're creating connections and deeper connections, and those people then are going to be the people that, if they know you, if they appreciate you as a person, they're going to be more inclined to listen and consume the content that you're creating, and then hopefully, one day, become a customer and be someone that's riding with you as you're doing all of that. So I just think it's really important to like sort of disassociate this idea of social media only being a moneymaker for you. It's a moneymaker, but it's an indirect moneymaker, where what you're really doing is building that brand and building that individual self, and hopefully that authentic self. And then, down the line, you really, long term, you're thinking, oh, I'm building this relationship with this person. I went on my own a year and a half ago, and there were people that were following me on Twitter and listening to my podcast for years that never handed me $1 because that's just not the state that I was in. I was working for another company. But then when I was able to go out, those people then are like, I like this dude. I've been following his stuff for a while. He's given me a lot. I want to give him back. I want to give back a little bit and support this person. And it's all because of the branding exercise and the branding that I just was able to do over the last decade or so. So just really important, be authentic, and also understand that Twitter, is more of a branding piece as opposed to this like thing that's going to drive financial success.
So I definitely agree with all that. I will say that like and listen, I'm not always like in a hiring position or anything like that at Yahoo, but in situations where people higher up on the food chain have told me, hey, check this person out, check out their social profiles and all that. I will say that I go immediately to replies, right? Like, I want to see how you're interacting with people. And you'll learn a lot more just by the way people handle themselves and conduct themselves. Are you respectful of the people that are disagreeing with you? Have you turned Twitter or your Twitter feed into a weirdly, unnecessarily hostile environment? Or, are you going to, if you're representing our company, are you going to represent it responsibly and represent it professionally? So that's actually what I'll look at more than, I don't know, whatever your original thoughts on fantasy football are, I'm sure are great. But it is equally important to see how you're interacting with other folks.
I mean, there's not much more to add from what these guys said, but, I will say, I haven't really seen a lot of people move up in the industry by winning arguments on Twitter. Like, no one ever goes, hey, I saw that one time you were fighting about this one play. You sure showed him. Like, that never works out, guys. No.
Nobody won the Gabe Davis Wars.
Yeah, like, we all lost the Gabe Davis Wars last year. Like, it is what it is. I think so much of it, like these guys have said, is that you are putting yourself out there on social media, Twitter, Instagram. I don't know if any of you guys are still on Facebook. My dad's on Facebook. You're putting yourself out there, and for very similar to what JJ's saying, it's your branding. If you are trying to get into this business of fantasy football, you should probably be treating it like a business. And if you're putting content out there, put the content on social media. I've actually started to do that a bit less, where I'm not writing so many of my takes on there, but I'm getting clips from my shows and putting that on social media so that people can find new and interesting ways to interact with me on social media, as opposed to just me firing off like a Miles Sanders take or something like that. So I think that it goes back to, yes, your branding, but, man, do your best to avoid the drama and avoid the fighting or being the kind of person that generally, kind of like Andy has said, almost makes themselves unhireable by having the wrong kind of replies to people.
Thank you, guys. One thing I'll add to that is use your real name. A lot of people don't. You don't. You probably can't get your actual Twitter name to be that, but the name that displays, just make it your name, and that way when you go to get hiring, they're going to hire you, not Fantasy Dominator Guru. So I see that happen a lot. So just do that, and it's back to what JJ or Andy said. Lean into who you are. Be authentic. It's okay, especially with kind of that end goal in mind. If you're not yet at the company maybe you want to be, think about what they would be looking for. Now, if you're trying to get a job with Barstool, that's probably very different than getting a job at Wall Street Journal, or Penn. I guess too soon maybe, but just be what think about, would this potential employer want to hire this content that I'm doing, and that kind of vibe. I'll be the first to say too, they all, they like to give me a hard time about being Mr. Rogers and the nice whatever stuff. That's me. That literally is who I am. But there's a million ways to skin a cat. Obviously, Barstool is wildly successful, way more than Football Guys, and they have a different vibe, and that works for them. So it's be who you are and find that audience and find your people there. But use your real name. All right, last question, and this is I tell everybody that's just getting started, you folks that are just thinking about doing this, let me clue you in. When you first start, you're going to suck. You're not going to be good. I look back at some of the old stuff that I've done, and it's just like cringy. And I don't feel that bad about it, because I don't know anybody in this industry that doesn't look back at their old stuff and think, man, that was just not very good. That's okay. It's going to happen. You just don't. And the only way, funny fact, the way you get better at fantasy sports content is like you get better at very much everything, repeating it, doing it more, doing more reps. I think that what Alfedo said was a great idea. Just do it. Somebody said, I did this content and nobody read it. And I'm like, fine, it probably wasn't that good to get started. That's no problem. The work is not who's read it right now. The work is you doing the reps. Get that out there. Keep doing that. Once you're past that a little bit, once you get going a little more, I would like you guys to talk a little bit about how you handle criticism and how you handle not just when it actually does suck, but maybe when there's a question about whether it sucks or not, and you're like maybe unfairly criticized, which kind of ties back to social media in lots of instances on that.
You want to start down there this time?
Yeah. You want to start off, Freedom?
Sure, why not? I guess I get criticized the most, so they're starting with me. I always I think back to the very first thing I did where I was an intern at a radio station and I really wanted to get on air, and I was like 22 years old, and I recorded just like a solo podcast for my PD, for my program director, and I was like, hey, can I get some notes? And he goes, yeah, I got one note. It sucks. And I was like, oh, okay. He's like, but the good news is that it can get better. And that's how you always have to look at all of this stuff, is that, yes, just like Joe said, we're all going to suck. I remember listening to JJ's podcast thinking, I can do that. I can do a solo 15-minute show, no problem. And some of the first initial feedback I got was, this is very forgettable. This is very mediocre. All right, cool. Now I needed to figure out ways that I was going to get better. And that's how you have to look at it. It's not an attack on you personally. It's not saying that you are not meant to be in this industry or that you cannot improve. Just like football players, we look at them. They may stink at something in college as a rookie and they get better. So can we. And you find new ways to improve. And honestly, the way I look at it, if I had gone, these 2 years in the fantasy industry and nobody gave me any feedback, it honestly means either A, no one's watching, or B, no one cares. And I really want that feedback. I want to improve. So it's easier said than done. Accept that feedback. Understand that it's coming from people who want to see you succeed. And I always go back to this word. It's a Japanese word, kaizen, which is just improving in all aspects of life. And so it gets really easy to lean into your strengths and find your comfort zone and say, I'm really good at doing this, and do that over and over. Go find the things that you're not good at and get better at those so that you have that big toolbox and you're well versed in everything.
I feel like one of the advantages that I've had is that I'm so old that I used to work for print publications that had like a rigorous editorial process, right? That was kind of merciless. Layers of editing and fact checking, and like it was really helpful to learn if you can survive that. Because some of just remember back to my undergrad days, some of the best writers I've ever known can't do it professionally because they can't handle being edited. They can't handle the critique of it because whether it's your football analysis, whether it's your writing, whether it's your presentation on video, like it's important to you. It feels very personal. It's not like taking criticism is not for everyone, and that's okay. But this is the whole game. The whole game is being able to get better from like enduring criticism, thoughtful criticism, and you're so lucky if you're able to work in an environment like Football Guys, like a handful of those out there within the industry where you're actually going to be subjected to thoughtful criticism. Like that's, I don't know, it can feel very difficult in the moment, but that is absolutely essential toward getting better. And it's been super helpful to me.
Yeah, I think with criticism, we will hear it on social media, on Twitter and whatnot, and then it'll be on the Reddit, wherever, all over the internet. I actually approach it from the perspective that a lot of criticism, there's a sense of truth in it, right? We think of criticism often, we sort of use it in the same breath as talking about like internet trolls and trolling. Trolling to me is like when people come to me and they say, hey, JJ, you have a big head, which I objectively understand I have a large head. But it's not that I they're clearly saying those things, something I can't control. This is what God gave me. Something I can't control. And they're clearly trying to get under my skin by saying, your appearance is X, Y, Z, right? But if they're coming at you and they're saying like, this take was wrong, or, like last year I wasn't super high on Josh Jacobs, right? And someone hits me up at the end of the season. They're like, Josh Jacobs was one of the league winners this year. Instead of me being like, well, yeah, but I got Tony Pollard right, so it's like, yeah, you're not wrong. Objectively, they're not wrong. If they're saying like, you did not get this right, I'm not going to go back and forth with this person because they're just coming at me saying you got this wrong. There's no extra piece to actually help me improve and get better. But one of the things that I've done I found this very helpful on Twitter, especially. People are coming at you, and they're coming at you because they want some sort of reaction, which is why they're adding you in the first place, right? And so they're in your mentions and they're saying whatever, and they want some sort of reaction a lot of times, and because they know that you're going to be reading that. What I found is actually kind of helpful is I go on Reddit, and this is not like a vain thing. This has nothing to do with that. I go on Reddit and I search my name to see what people are saying about the stuff that I'm doing, not because I, like have this like insane urge to like, be satisfied that way. But it's more so that they're not saying anything to me. They're talking about me, right? And it's just this like very objective way to get, I don't like the way that he delivers this on his show or does this or that. And so if there are ways, like sort of these like third-party ways, these extra ways that no one's coming at you directly, it actually can bring forth some help and some aid to you. But at the end of the day, like I do think that most criticism is valid, and you have to just have the self-awareness of who you are, what you're doing, and that literally everyone in this room and everyone who does anything in content and content creation, we got to improve something. Like, we're not perfect at this. Like, there's a lot of stuff that we can improve on, and people, even if they're in a rage when they're sending you those messages, there's a lot of truth in that too.
Yeah, and being involved in content creation, I think that the loudest sound that you can hear is silence when you put something out. And so recognizing that criticism is a gift, that somebody's taking that time to give you some information that with the way they're seeing it. And yeah, sometimes maybe it's a gift from your aunt that you can't wait to take back as soon as the event's over, but at the same time, it's all a gift. It's something that you can learn from, and having that correct mindset with that. And I think that probably everybody up here, everybody that has had even a shred of success in the industry has learned to compartmentalize and to use that as if you get motivation out of that, if you get improvement out of that, recognizing that and putting your effort, if it makes you feel some kind of way, into a productive outcome that can help move you along is really a big key on that. But again, just recognize that it's a gift and look for those opportunities to improve. But these guys have done a fantastic job of walking through that.
Thank you, buddy. Yeah, when you have an email address like I do, that is the real email address is the actual reply back to our email that goes out to 600,000 people every day. I get a lot of feedback, and some of it is crazy. Some of it is actually kind of scary, but all of it is a gift. I mean, it's like you said, it's a gift, and I think JJ's 100% right. There's always they're just legit. Yeah, they're out there. But there is almost always one they cared enough to take time to send you something back, and if you can look at it and go, could this be better? Could this be? Did I wander too much? Was it too much fluff? Was it too much hot takey? Did I not back up my takes? I mean, there's a whole bunch of that kind of stuff that you might be wrong, and it's a good thing to look at and see. The other thing I would say is just own it. I mean, the easiest way to diffuse, criticism is really bugging. He's like, yeah, I missed that one. I mean, the fantasy receipt guys, I thought was just hilarious because they were just, y'all know what they were doing. They were just pulling up anytime anybody got something wrong, and they were posting it. And they did something last year of me talking about Jalen Hurts in his rookie year, where he was far from it was hardly a hot take to be critical of Jalen Hurts in his rookie year. And they pulled that back up, and I was like, dude, if you're gonna like, I mean, if you like that one, you're gonna love what I said about Russell Wilson last year. I mean, so it's like, yeah, I missed it. I was wrong, and think about it and try to look. I think all these guys up here and the good analysts I know do a great job of like refining their process. Okay, what went wrong there? Well, I missed that play. I missed that guy. What did I do wrong? Maybe it was luck and a bad injury. I'm not worried about that. Or maybe I should have seen something that I didn't. And you can almost always learn that stuff. The other thing is, I don't know if it's how widespread this is. Maybe this is a Tennessee saying, but they say you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun your buddy, right? And so it's like, so you're not going to be 100% right. The best baseball player, is unsuccessful 60% of the time or more when he goes to the bat. So you don't have to be. You're not going to be right every time. Get comfortable with being wrong. Get comfortable with failing. All right. These are good. Okay, those are good 3 questions. Good answers to all of those by these guys. Let's do this. Let's open up the Q&A. Y'all ask whatever you like to anybody, and there's also some of you guys in the audience may want to answer some of these too. So, right here, buddy. Yeah, can you do it from back there? Yeah.
So it's kind of an abstract question, but we think about like Deontay Johnson dropping passes. right? He goes to the jugs machine after practice and he works on it, right? So it's one thing to be able to do that for a football player. What can we do as content creators to kind of work on our craft outside of just playing the game, outside of just making more content? Like, is there anything that you guys do to work on your stuff? Like, is there a tool you use, or is there a site you use, or something like that? Does that question make sense? Okay.
So one of the things I do, and it actually always surprises me when I ask people about this, and they say, I don't watch or listen to a lot of other content. I don't read a lot of other content from other companies because I don't want to be worried about what they're doing. I'm the exact opposite. I kind of look at what other people are doing as almost like a coach or a player watching game film. I want to know what's going on in the industry. I want to see, like, man, JJ does something really well. Andy does something really well. Can I be able to add that to my repertoire of what I'm doing? And so I don't know that it's ever as simple as like doing a broadcast jugs machine where I'm just like recording in front of the mirror or something. But I think that some of the best lessons you can learn are, one, from getting your own criticisms right, but then being able to just watch, listen, read what everyone else is doing and see what they do well that you like and think that maybe you can learn from them, what you can incorporate. Because I always think like that's such a smart way to get better, is see what people who have already succeeded, what have they done that works for them. It may not work for you, right? Like doing a 15-minute show did not work for me. It obviously works for JJ. But there are pieces of that you can take and get better at it. So that's the way I look at it. It's almost like a player that's watching game film to improve.
I will just say I don't think there's like a lot of, not that you're asking for a shortcut, but I don't think there are a lot of shortcuts. Like the only thing that makes you better as a writer is to write consistently and do it every day. Certainly when I was getting started, and nobody was paying me for anything, and whether I would have some pitches out there, whatever, nobody was like asking me to write for them. I still made sure that I wrote like 1,000 words every day that I felt really good about, and that I, could have been on any topic, usually on sports topics. You just got to maintain good habits, and that's the part that like sort of keeps you ready for a big opportunity that may come your way. And it's the same thing with talking into a microphone. It's the same thing with video. Like you've got to get practice reps in or find a way to when nobody's asking you to do it.
Yeah, I'd also say, especially if you're not getting like editorial or content direction from someone at the company that you're working, like if you're doing something on your own, let's say, one of the things for me that's been helpful is sort of being my harshest critic. And there are episodes of my show that I have done that I never released because I knew after I studied it, I researched it, and I even recorded an episode on a topic. It just wasn't strong enough for me to publish. And I'm a believer that the last thing that you did is the thing that should be the biggest and most important thing that you that people remember you by from like a content perspective and all that. You should be getting better every time that you publish something. And so I'm not going to publish garbage. Like I don't want to publish something bad just to get something out there. And so I do think that like getting reps is definitely the number one thing, because technically, Deontay Johnson working like catching the ball with the jugs machine, he's getting reps, right? It's like going to the gym. Like you're getting stronger when you're going to the gym, and it's no different than sitting in front of a camera or a microphone and just doing it over and over and over again. Like when I first started doing this, remember, I'm not even that big of a drinker, and I remember the first ever podcast I did, I sat in a closet and drank a couple beers before I did it because I was so nervous, right? But you just do it more and more and more, and you get more and more comfortable doing those things. But I do think you have to be realistic and self-aware and be a critic of yourself, and don't just publish things to publish things, because that then creates, when you don't do that, that creates a great cycle of people really enjoying the content that you're doing, and then you then continuing to do that content.
And I think in terms of tools, if you're looking to get involved in content creation or even grow in content creation, if you're not listening to Casey Kasem's podcast, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because if you're looking for tools on how you can get better, that is one of the single best tools, because I think everybody up here and a lot of people in this room have taken an hour or more out of their day to sit down with Casey, and Casey has walked through the journey of everybody, and everybody's at different levels, but you can hear about those journeys, and you can look at yourself and recognize where you are, where do you need to improve, and so many people have walked through what those next steps would be on that podcast. And so that's one of the very best in the industry. And if you're looking for tools on to improve or how to get involved, I think you're going to find, I think all of us up here have done it. And so it's a great outlook, great tool.
I nudged Jeff when JJ said be tough on himself because Jeff is that guy. It's funny, we have this example in front of us every Monday, right, with coaches looking at game film, and yet I think so few people actually do that. It's a good thing for your life, and it's a good thing for your writing. Is like every so often, regularly check in. How'd it go? What went well? What didn't go well? Don't beat yourself up too much, but like learn from those mistakes and analyze it and review. Right, who's got another question? Probably got time for one more, maybe. Steven?
So if you were starting today, what platforms would you spend the most time on, like, creating? Like Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, that type of stuff?
So I think that the traditional answer in this space right now, if you were to ask most people, they're like, yeah, get on Twitter because that's where the fantasy community is. But I would actually, first off, it depends on your goal, right? Like if you're trying to just simply monetize your content via some platform, TikTok's probably best for you because TikTok's creator program is actually pretty strong compared to some of the other programs. But I do think that, there's a natural shift away from editorial. Not that editorial is not important, but having the ability to, sit in front of a camera or talk well and do the not even the podcasting, but just an audio thing is great. And then the other piece to that, though, is, in my opinion, you always want to do things where you're able to contain an audience and retain that audience. Like, for instance, when I went out on my own about a year and a half ago, I was writing all my content on like numberfire.com and doing the typical editorial thing, but I switched that to a newsletter because think about an article that you publish, you're going to get X number of page views from that article, but those people might not ever come back to read you ever again, right? You want to capture those people somehow, so I'm capturing them via newsletter, getting their email address so I can then be like, yo, what up? I got another article that I just wrote and it's in your email inbox, right? So you want to be on a platform or force and that's why podcasting is so impactful too, is because you get that RSS feed that people are subscribed to and you're continuously getting those downloads because most people are not unsubscribing from that show. You're just getting more and more and more. So that's a really, really important piece. But I actually think like if you're like TikTok right now is crazy. You can get, I'm not even really on there. I'm starting to this season and stuff, but the number of people on there is crazy. And from strictly a economics perspective, it has arguably the best creator program too. So I think, depends where you're at, depends what kind of content you want to do. You should be platform specific from that perspective. But, a general answer, I don't think TikTok's a terrible idea right now, even though you're sort of, obviously try to still be on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. But I would, focus that content on that platform in particular.
I would say too, it goes back to the self-awareness thing. Understand what you're good at, and I'll talk to people sometimes that I know are really good video content creators, and they'll think I'm known as maybe a newsletter guy, so they say I need to be on a newsletter. I'm like, maybe not. I don't know. That's not necessarily true. It doesn't. It may not. It depends on if you're good at writing. Are you good at this? Now, again, nobody's good when they first start, but there's that balance of, are you good at it? Do you have a natural ability or affinity towards it? And do you like doing it? So find those, and it's good to play around with all, beyond audio, video, and written, all three. But most people I know are better at one of the three than another. And some of it is you sort of have to take what God's given you there. If you're really good at writing, just dive into that and go hard at that. And maybe you don't have to be on video or a podcast. I see sometimes people force it. And that's where you need good friends around you. Get somebody to give you honest feedback. They need to be able to tell you this is not good. And there's a difference between not good and it can get better, and not good and maybe you should try a different medium. And
I was just going to say, you also just naturally, you can feel it when you're bad at something. Like I've done TV stuff before, right? I was bad. Like I hated it. That's not the right platform for me. I'm way too casual for it. It's just not my thing. And so I'm not going to go pursue some anchor related type job. It's just not something that I know that I feel comfortable with or like doing. You're totally right though. I mean, it's got to be like double down on what you're good at, know what you're good at, and focus on that for sure. But like I said, when you start to do it and you get those reps, you start to kind of know what you're good at and what you're not good at.
And I think the nature of this panel, getting started in the fantasy industry, experiment everywhere and figure out what those natural avenues might be. But it's I think it's very hard to be hired somewhere as just the Twitter thread guy. Like if that's what you do, it's just like Joe's not looking to put Twitter threads on footballguys.com. It's hard to do that. And so multi-purpose and repurpose your content. And you might have one great idea, and maybe it does make a great Twitter thread, but then put that into a Word document or get a website and put that on there. And that way it's different things that you're putting out, but you're doing the same research. And so multi-purposing that, but also you're building that resume and you're getting those reps but you're building a strong resume too. And so as your name might come across Andy's desk or Joe's desk and they're looking to make a move, you've got a resume they can fall back on and showing that you do have that ability to multi-purpose that content, because that is a big push on one, managing time, because realistically to get involved in this, it's very unlikely that you're just starting full-time. You're going to be doing a full-time job and you're going to be doing this on the side, and that's the reality of what most people are going to be dealing with. So valuing that time, but figuring out different avenues that you can figure out what you are comfortable and what you do enjoy doing.
You guys said that really well.
So I'm going to give you kind of the more condensed answer that's not try everything. I'll tell you from my specific perspective. A lot of what I do is helping run the YouTube for Football Guys. And over my time of making content, I have found that YouTube has been such a useful tool because it's one of the few platforms where you are going to get back so much data on how your audience receives your content. What part did they stop watching? What part did they replay? What part did they love? Are people dropping off after your first 30 seconds, right? Like there's so many little things where you can say, okay, like if video is your thing, and there's so many things here where you could say, okay, that worked really well. How can we repurpose that for the next thing? And like these guys have talked about, it's going to be about being comfortable and knowing what your strength is. But for me, that's something that I've been able to see. Who's my audience? How long are they watching? What are the topics that they enjoy the most? It's been a really invaluable tool for me.
Anybody else have one?
What's up, you guys? So I just want to talk for a second. In this industry, I mean, obviously we're at the Expo and everyone's connecting and networking and talking. I just wanted to ask you guys for your personal journey so far in the industry. What has been your best connection that you've made, either with a company or with another person, or what is that best connection you've made with somebody?
Well, Bob, yes. Bob's a fantastic one. For me personally, in my journey, Dave Kluge's been the best connection that I've made in my journey. We got started, and kind of our timelines are pretty similar, and we've taken a little bit different paths, but that's been somebody that has been my best friend doing this, and because of meeting Dave and being friends with Dave was in to be able to meet Joe and to be able to make that connection. And so, but finding a friend like that is at a similar place in their journey, that has similar goals or similar end points, and maybe you guys branch off on where your goals might end up, but having that honest support system and just having a best friend and that understands what you're both going through at the same time is invaluable.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that is important. I have friends, family, and stuff who know what I do, and they, I talk to them about it, but they don't know exactly what it's like to be out on the internet and have stuff out there and being critiqued all the time and stuff like that. So it's really important to find good friends in the space who you've connected with on both a personal and work level. For me, it's been Denny Carter, my podcast co-host for Living the Stream, and then Rich Rebar is another one from Sharp Football Analysis. The person who really helped move my career forward after about a year after I launched my ebook, or 6 months after I launched my ebook, Evan Silva gave me a shot to write a series on Roto World, and it's crazy because when he first called me to do the series on Roto World, I remember being nervous as all, and he's calling me and I'm shaking and have this conversation with him, and now I get to talk to him all the time. He's a buddy of mine, and it's just people will open doors, but I do think having that sort of foundation of friendship within the space who you can talk to and talk about what you're going through is very, very important.
Mentioning Denny as a key contact for you, that's like a cry for help. That's amazing. for me, I would have to go back to something that I mentioned earlier, which is like the first editor that I really had that put me through like a real hardcore old school editorial process was super valuable. She was Allison True is her name. She was the editor-in-chief of a local publication in Chicago called The Reader. And that, I mean, that, like I came out of college, everybody comes out of college as a writer thinking that their deathless prose shouldn't be touched, right? And I mean, it's hard when you have to fit the voice of a publication, but that's what like being a professional writer is too, right? Like what are the flourishes that are unique to you that will not survive their editorial process? She was just invaluable to me, kind of coached me along the way, and I still check in with her all the time. She's super important.
So one of the best connections for me is I just kept emailing Joe at FootballGuys.com until he finally replied and gave me a job. No, it's gonna sound really corny, but it's this guy that's right here in the front row, Dr. Vig. He's been my friend since I was 18 years old. He was my freshman orientation leader at college, and he was the guy that, you know, once when I was doing a podcast that, by the way, I failed horribly at doing my own podcast once, and I just decided maybe a year later I was going to pick it up again. Okay, so you will fail. It will happen. Cool. Get back up there and do it again. But I asked him, we were doing something about like the NFL draft and rookies, and I was like, hey, there's a bunch of guys with injuries. You want to come on and talk about that? And it just worked. And there was something really great about that. And it was nice to have a friend in the space, not even in the space, but just a friend that I could lean on. And I do still think to this day, I'm still very naturally introverted. So coming to expos and conferences like these, the first year here, I was terrified to go talk to that man, who now I talk to on a daily basis. But being able to have someone that I could lean on, a friend who believed in me, because he shot straight with me. He would tell me, like, this wasn't a good episode. You probably shouldn't broadcast that one. Having someone I could lean on that could be honest with me was very helpful. So I think whether it's a close personal friend, whether it's someone that you meet in the industry, having someone who is just genuinely honest with you that will help you continue to keep your work at a high standard, that's going to be the most important connection you can make.
I think that's exactly right. No, that's a good question. And the one for me, it's Bob Harris. Just Bob was the guy that befriended me early, and we just, hit it off and it went there. But more importantly than the specific, I think in my experience, it's been find someone who's where you are about 5 years down the road from where you are now. And as we don't, if it can get weird when you say, I want to go take this gigantic jump here, but find someone who's, somewhat like you, has something that you feel it's a realistic goal that you can be, and say, here's this person just a few years down the road, and kind of befriend them, and that those can be invaluable. That's a good question. All right, yeah, we're on our time here, so let's wrap it up there. I know JJ's got another panel to be to, but thank y'all for being here. All these folks are accessible, me included, so thank y'all for that.